This is an issue that the drought will have such severe impacts on groundwater and on surface water. I was thinking, I think Ben Franklin's quote, "We'll know the value of water when the well runs dry." The context for why I said this is Austin's great David and Goliath story, Freeport-McMoRan, they're like a massive company. And at the time, they were listed on the toxic inventory list as the largest polluter in the United States. And they were the company behind the Barton Creek PUD. And they'd come to town and said, we can do this massive development. They were proposing a city the size of Waco in the Barton Springs watershed, upstream from Barton Springs along Barton Creek. And it won't pollute the springs. We know how to do this. And everybody had the memory of when the developers of the Barton Creek Mall said the same thing. We could shave off this hilltop and build this massive shopping mall and it won't pollute the springs. And everyone saw that it did. When I first came to town in 1988, one of the first things I did was I went to Barton Springs. It's a bit of a sacred site.
A mile down Mopac, big shopping center, Barton Creek Mall. That was a hill where we would all go sit as kids and drink beer and look at the lights in the city. All few 100,000 of them, as Clark said. They took the top of that hill off to build Barton Creek Mall, and within 30 minutes, Barton Springs pool turned so cloudy that it had to be closed for safety reasons. You couldn't see. It became white opaque.
What was going on with SOS versus what was being done by Freeport-McMoRan. Freeport-McMoRan had found a way to reach into the African-American community by working through the political class.
I was the politics editor and columnist, investigative reporter for the weekly Austin Chronicle. We sort of sounded the alarm on this company, Freeport-McMoRan, owned the biggest gold mine in the world in Indonesia. They were headed by a former UT lineman, football player, and they wanted to build this massive development 7 miles upstream on Barton Creek. And so we sounded the alarm about that and helped set off what turned out to be an all-night public hearing where 900 people signed up to speak. It ended up being 7-0 against it. And
it really started in August of 1991 when we tried to get the council to pass a strong enough ordinance, and they didn't. And we said, all right, if you won't do it, we will. We crafted the SOS ordinance and then gathered signatures to put it on the ballot. But in the meantime, the powers in the community delayed the election from May to August so that they could file a whole bunch of development applications and then claim they were grandfathered. And that was their plan. The passage of SOS, which happened 30 years ago this month, August 8th, 1992, is Austin's great David and Goliath story. Everybody who comes here should know it. Everyone who comes to Barton Springs should know it. Because the passage of that law, I believe, is the reason that we can still swim in Barton Springs today. It's important to be true to yourselves and to your beliefs. Raymond Slade, who was a geologist, still with us but ill, was one of them. Another was the man who really helped take Michael Dell's brilliant idea and turn it into a hugely successful company, Dell Computers, Lee Walker. And I remember him saying, I've got the religion, but I need the catechism on Barton Springs. When he learned that we had worked with scientists, that we had studied what kinds of limits on impervious cover would be necessary to protect water quality, and understood the rigor that we brought to crafting the ordinance and the education and outreach that we were doing in the community, he basically just said, sign me up. I'm there. I want to help protect Barton Springs. What can I do to help?
Roberta Crenshaw, she's the one that had the idea and got the hike and bike trail around Town Lake. And then she went to Lady Bird just as the Johnsons were coming back from Washington after he was president, and got her involved in that. So you had some magnificent accomplishments. Ms. Crenshaw went on to be one of the leaders in getting the Barton Creek Trail.
Save Barton Creek Association, 1979. Before that, late 60s, early 70s, the Zilker Park Posse. That was the first organized group that I know about around protecting Barton Springs.
The president and CEO of the NAACP at the time the ordinance was passed was Ben Chavis. Ben Chavis coined the phrase environmental racism.
Jeff was a real hero in the community, both for the African American community, but for the larger community, in that when he was head of NAACP and we were organizing to get community support for SOS, he looked at the science, he looked at the policy, and in the face of tremendous pressure from, again, the guy that owned the world's largest gold mine, this guy spread money everywhere. And there was tremendous pressure from the business community and other leaders in Jeff's community to not support SOS. But he still guided the organization and said, we look at the science, we look at the policy, and we decide on that, not on the politics. And there was a great political cost for Jeff from people who came after him as a result of that. So that's just a really important part of the story.
PhD PE Lauren Ross stepped up and did the water quality engineering. Lauren's professional expertise was really important. The professional community ostracized her immediately. She was blacklisted. She had the courage to say, not only are y'all right on the science, but here's the engineering on the impervious cover. She's doing well today.
Also Barbara Mahler from who's with USGS.
And the leader of that community who emerged was Susanna Almanza, and also Ron Davis from the African American community. Susanna formed an organization called Poder. Ron's group was called East Austin Strategy Team. I think they stand out in history as the only community organization which defeated ExxonMobil.
You mentioned Ron Davis, who I considered a friend and a mentor, that our team would work to maintain the legacy that in putting together the East Austin Strategy Team.
Shooty has a list of the all-night speakers, Shooty Fath.
Ray Perryman's paid study that reached this ridiculous conclusion that passing Barton Springs would ruin the economy released his study. There was a big press conference at the Chamber of Commerce. One of the SOS supporters dressed up in a giant chicken suit.
Eric
Anderson.
Eric Anderson.
After school programming in our Title I schools, what we call enrichment, which is being involved in organizations that focus on getting kids outside, that focus on the environment, create opportunities to work at places like our Natural Resources Division at the county or Parks and Recreation over at the city.
There definitely needs to be more land purchases.
The voters approved $22 million to start purchasing the 30,000 acres known as the Balcones Canyonlands Plan. Pick something to do and do it well. So I would love one of the outgrowths of this gathering today. I'm being serious. 25 years from now, some of you are going to be creating those future public spaces. We're starting now, and it takes decades of work. So I encourage you to follow that vision you see.
George, people can join the Hill Country Conservancy. Young people can join Emerging Professionals in Conservation, which is a project within Hill Country Conservancy.
If you want to volunteer, we need scientists, artists, communicators, and we're building a trail called the Violet Crown Trail. Find out about all those good things at hillcountryconservancy.org. And thank you, Matt, for letting me give that plug for conservation. We're the real estate company for Mother Earth.
Because what we see in the stories is individuals with ideas, following up on those ideas, finding other folks to work together. It doesn't start with a big flood. It starts with a trickle. It starts with finding others to work together, finding something that you're interested in, asking the question why. And that goes back to geology itself. Every force on this planet leaves its mark. A lot of it's written in the stones. A lot of what we do is written in what happens in the future. The SOS amendment was put together 30 years ago. It affected how development has happened. what's going to happen 30 years down the line is going to be a direct result of what we are starting to do now. That means each one of you getting outside and connecting with the natural world and helping others connect with the natural world, so at least you have a common language to talk from. It all comes down to how you wish to dedicate your work. Speaking for SBCA, one of the things that we are striving to do is to find ways to not just educate people, but actually create careers where people can actually participate in monitoring the environment, in studying the environment, in defining the problems that have to be solved. Engineers solve problems, scientists define those problems. And we will have a better future. It's not just us, it's also the people that aren't even born yet. And we have to trust that they will take what we are building and make good decisions from there. And please stay active, participate, be part of your community. Not just your laboratory, but your community.